Good afternoon. My name is Dona Caine Francis, and I'm glad to be with you today to present a topic near and dear to my heart, tips from the sex therapist, how to keep it hot and healthy. Thank you for coming. I hope that this workshop will provide you some information and give you an opportunity to pose those questions that have been curious for you for maybe a lifetime, maybe more recently because of the sexual relationship you're in, or maybe the curiosity is it Dr. Ruth that's with us today? No. It is nursing's answer to Dr. Ruth. I'm an advanced practice registered nurse. And as an advanced practice registered nurse, I think my credentials speak highly to why I'm here today with you. I have a private practice outside of Charlotte at Lake Norman as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I'm also nationally certified by ASECT as a sex therapist, an author. I've written 2 books. The first one, When Benjamin Wants to Know, Family Conversations About the Facts of Life. Ben and I wrote that when he was 8 because of the multitude of questions that came across. Actually, I think that they weren't always Ben's questions, but maybe they were his contemporaries because they knew that his mother was a sex therapist. So we wrote the book together to try to address his questions, and Ben is now 25. My daughter Jordan is 22, and the 2 of them have kept my skills as an askable parent vibrant for these last 2 decades. I also have the credentials as an author for a book that I wrote, Managing Menopause Beautifully, Physically, Emotionally, and Sexually. I know you are not dealing with menopause issues, but your mothers and fathers probably have been as they've transitioned through their own menopause or menopause, andropause transition in their life. And besides being a sex therapist and a mom and an author, I also host a weekly radio talk show called Sex in Our Cities. It's a program, comes every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. on voiceamerica.com. So if you've missed any of our programs and you're very interested, go back to the archives and tap into voiceamerica.com and see what we bring to you. Our mission is to educate, to motivate, and to empower for healthy sexuality across the lifespan. So some of our programs are teaching parents how to be that primary sex educator for their children, or we may be working with college students and they're on the program and they're our guests and they're talking about some of the challenges that they face or questions around sexually transmitted infections. And we also work with those midlife areas and crises, how to keep a midlife relationship vibrant and sexually active. So the radio show, I think, also helps me have the credentials to speak with you today. My goals for today are threefold. First, I'd like to help you increase your sexual wisdom. Secondly, I'd like to help you identify what your sexual needs are. Your sexual needs for love, affection, attention, and be able to get those needs met with your partner. Be able to be courageous enough to share what those sexual needs are with your partner. And to help you be better prepared to make good sexual decisions for yourself. And so, I think that today's forum will offer you an opportunity to pose some of those questions that you've been curious about. I think today's forum will also help us address some of the multitude of freedoms that you face in college life. You know, think about it. When you were in high school, you had curfews. You had certain times that you had to be in. Like, what, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock? Do you have a curfew in college? Do you have more social opportunities? Is it wide open as to how you're going to spend your time and how you're going to negotiate study time with fraternity time or sorority time, or the curiosity that you may have about, sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Absolutely. So I hope that today's forum gives you an opportunity to pose some of those questions. And if you have a question and you want to stop me along the way and ask it, by all means do. Or you can put it on the index card and you can pass it to me when you'd like, and and I'll try to stop and answer those questions along the way. I have a question to pose to you to start our conversation, because this is a sexual conversation that we're going to have today. I want you to think about this. Are you sexually sophisticated, or are you disappointingly naive? If you're sexually sophisticated, then you probably have had parents that gave you a good foundation for your sexual identity. They gave you good, strong, positive messages about being a sexual person. They didn't tell you all the don'ts about sexuality. Don't have sex, you'll get pregnant. Don't have sex, you'll have a sexually transmitted disease. Don't have sex, you'll ruin your reputation. Of course, there is kind of this double standard when it comes to guys and it comes to girls. But that's a whole different conversation. So somebody that's sexually sophisticated has had parents that have taught them, probably sex education, good peer group, maybe strong religious messages about sexuality from a positive venue. So I'm curious, what information did you get about sexuality? What messages did your parents give you?
When I was younger, I had the talk from my dad, and as I grew up and went through those different phases of my young adulthood, they've always been very supportive and there to answer any questions that I've had along the way. And I have turned to them, and they've been very supportive. I also went to a sex education class in high school and had a lot of friends that we could talk about this kind of stuff when we didn't want to really talk to our parents about some topics. So I did have a peer group to consult with, and also had a few long-term relationships as well.
So the messages from your parents, the availability of your parents to seek wise counsel from them, and if you weren't comfortable going to your parents, you had a peer group that was supportive, that would give you information. Hopefully that information, a lot of it was correct. You know, a lot of times the peer group doesn't give you information that's so correct. Like one time that I've done this workshop, a question came up: can you get a sexually transmitted disease from oral sex? And the student said, no, of course you can't. Well, wrong, of course you can. So we have to be careful about what the peer group tells us about sexuality. So that's why you're here today, to hear from the sex expert. So I would say that more than likely you're more that sexually sophisticated individual. You've had education, you've had people that have spoken with you, answered your questions, and you've had a peer group that's been supportive. And you said you've had good relationships along the way.
Yep.
Great. What about that other individual that I talked about? What about the disappointingly naive individual? And I have kind of a story to tell about that. Most recently, I've had a young woman that's been referred to me by the health department at the university, the health clinic. And she came because she's in her senior year, and she's been in this relationship for 6 months and has recently proclaimed her love to her man and is ready to explore sexuality. She's a virgin. He's a virgin. Neither one of them have explored sex with another person. And what they're exploring today has really been more kissing and a little bit of touching. Well, now they're wanting to explore sexual intercourse, and she is frightened. Not only frightened, but she's almost at a panic state when they get to that discussion, even the discussion. She's never been able to use a tampon because she's too frightened, and now feels somewhat of pressure to go to this life-changing opportunity as a sexual being with her partner before they end their college career, with graduation being in May. So we've tried to slow things down a little bit and help her feel more comfortable about the messages that she carries in her own head about being a sexual woman. That it doesn't have to be fear-based, that it's not a ugly, nasty, dirty thing, that it's about pleasure, it's about loving, that the messages that she received from her religious doctrine, her religious community, sex is bad, don't do it, you'll have a bad reputation. She's trying to move from that and create her own messages about sexuality now. So I'd say that your sexual identity is formed, that foundation of who you are as a sexual being is formed from the messages that your parents give you, and hopefully they're askable parents and they're looking for teachable moments along the way to answer questions and to provide that sexual education. Your sexual identity is also formed by your peer group, what your peers discuss about sexuality. If they've been involved in abusive sexual relationships, if they've been involved in good, stable sexual relationships, if they've never been involved in relationships and you're the first one in your peer group to venture out. Also comes from your religious doctrine. Messages come from, think about MTV. Think about the exposure that you've had in your generation to MTV and the songs that you hear and what you see in movies and television. In my generation, I was raised in the South. I was raised in Louisiana. And the Rolling Stones song, Can't Get No Satisfaction, was censored and not allowed to go over the airwaves. Now, think of what you're listening to these days and what that was like in my generation. So you really have a lot of challenges when it comes to the freedoms of college education, when the social life, and the sexual freedoms that you face. My hope today is to try to answer more of those questions and try to set a framework that helps you feel more comfortable as you blossom